it's never any fun having to arrest a naked guy. Hey guys, what is going on? I hope everybody is having a fantastic week so far. So the other night was very interesting. This whole last weekend was nuts. The entire weekend was absolutely crazy. It was just call to call to call. I think working 12-hour shifts, I can only think of about 4 hours of the entire weekend that we were not busy or tied up with some sort of call. And these weren't just any ordinary calls. These were suicides, accidents with injuries. We had a robbery and attempted rape. We had people with gunshot wounds. We had drive-bys. So needless to say, it was a very crazy weekend. But luckily, there was one call that kind of broke up some of the monotony. My sergeant, who is a female, and yes, that kind of matters in what I'm leading up to, she was on regular patrol and she was checking out some of the known areas where people like to hang out and do things they're not supposed to do. Well, as she is driving around, she notices a car that's backed into a fishing area. Now, keep in mind, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. So as she gets out with this vehicle, she sees somebody's knee in the passenger seat kind of going back and forth over the dashboard. As she approaches the vehicle, she sees a white male completely naked in the passenger seat of a car. And it was kind of funny because the way she explained it afterward was she did not have her body cam, so she felt she needed a male officer there. So she calls for one of the units that worked nearby. He was tied up on a traffic stop, so I was en route. Now, I didn't know at the time, nobody knew that this guy was naked. So as I'm on my way, she calls me on the phone and she's like, hey, this guy is naked in his car. I'm like, oh God, this is the start of every bad incident report. The officer that was on the traffic stop was actually closer than I was, so he was able to respond first. He was there for a couple minutes and then I arrived. So they are talking to this naked guy in the passenger seat and he is very argumentative from the start. You can tell he's very visibly drunk and he's very argumentative with them. I start looking around. We end up finding a pair of shorts and a pair of underwear that are like 50 feet behind his car. And both clothing items were soaked with piss. So luckily the other officer had his baton on him, so he extends his baton, he picks up the clothing items with the baton, brings them back to the car, and makes the guy put his boxers back on. Supposedly the guy came out there to fish. He was drinking some beer. His wife was supposedly with him. The wife was nowhere to be found. So like our first thought was, God, did they get into an argument? Did something crazy happen? Why is this guy naked in the passenger seat of his car and his wife is nowhere to be found? So as the other two officers are talking to this guy, I start scouring the area trying to locate a female. I'm looking around and about 5 minutes later, I actually find her down by this riverbank, passed out in the grass, covered in like ants and mosquitoes, and she had like her shirt wrapped over her knees down to her ankles, and she was on her side just out cold. Now my first reaction when I saw her, the way she was laying, was like, yep, she's dead. Luckily, thank God, she was just passed out. She was drunk. She woke up. She was extremely friendly. The entire encounter, she was very friendly. She said they came out there, they got into a little spat, I guess. She walked off and let him continue fishing. Well, I guess she thought the riverbank was a good spot for a nap. And apparently these two had just gotten married like 2 or 3 weeks ago. They live with his mom, who does not support the fact that he married her so quickly. Anyway, long, boring drama, whatever. Well, the first thing that the wife tells me is that this guy is a former combat veteran. He was medically discharged out of the military about 4 years ago and is considered 100% disabled. So after learning this, I end up going to the sergeant. I'm like, hey, I found his wife. She was over here asleep. This guy is a combat veteran, just so you know. Sergeant's like, yeah, he's been telling me the same thing and that we don't have any authority to arrest him. Any authority? She's like, yeah. He's saying we can't arrest him.
You're gonna learn today.
So as we're talking to this guy, we kind of are looking through the car, you know, from the outside, and there's like liquid in the cup holders. That liquid was also piss. There was piss everywhere. There was piss on his clothes. There was piss in the car. There was like piss up on the steering wheel. The keys were outside of the car on the ground, also covered with piss. R. Kelly would have had a heyday at this scene.
I'm gonna piss on it.
So basically the charges we had were indecent exposure for him and public drunk for both of them. Now, we were not originally planning on charging them, and this was not my call, so it wasn't my call to make on whether or not the arrest was made. And our original plan was to let both of them go, especially, and the sergeant brought up a good point, especially with him being a former service member. You know, we tend to have a little leniency toward former or active duty members. But this guy was an asshole. The weird part about it was as soon as he got out of the car, like, he never gave me any real issues. He looked at me and he said, "I could tell by your haircut and your demeanor that you are former military, so you understand what I'm talking about. As being an employee of Department of Defense, you need federal jurisdiction to be able to place me under arrest. Ask the last two officers with your agency what happened when they tried to place me under arrest, because they both got fired 2 years ago." Well, I've been with this department for about 2.5 years now. We've never had anybody fired over making an arrest of a federal employee. So I knew from the start he was full of shit, but he really truly believed what he was saying. Now here's the messed up part. After he got his clothes on, we were trying to explain to him that he was naked, and he was like, "No, I wasn't." Yeah, you were. No, I had my clothes on the whole time. I haven't done anything wrong. Am I being detained? Yeah, you're being detained. You were naked, and you're drunk in the passenger seat of a car. You know, just another Sunday night for you, I guess. So long story short, this guy ends up getting aggressive with one of the officers on scene, so he decides, you know what, you need to sleep this off. You're going to jail. So he ends up arresting the guy, puts him in the back of the car, and apparently on the way to the jail, this guy is telling him that he's going to end him and his family. Like, he was making threats toward the officer. Now, the officer did not end up charging him with terroristic threats. Obviously, the guy was drunk. Maybe he had some PTSD that he was trying to deal with. So again, we tried to give service members the benefit of the doubt and try to give them as many chances as possible, which is what we were trying to do with him originally, but he talked himself into going to jail. We did not escalate the situation. The funny part was, and the officer told me this later on in the night, once they got to the jail, he opens up the back seat and he tells the guy, he's like, "Step out." The guy's like, "No." So the officer's, of course, like, "Here we go." And before the officer makes him get out, the guy tells him, "I'll do anything you ask me to do, but I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do." The officer's like, "Okay, will you please step out of the car?" And the guy apparently like jumps out. He's still handcuffed. He jumps out. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. What would you like for me to do next, sir?" Will you go over here where the door is for me, please?" "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." So luckily at the jail, I guess he flipped a switch and he was the nicest guy and he didn't give any more problems. Lucky for him, that officer did not notify dispatch. Usually if we have a combative subject, whenever we are on the way to the jail, we notify dispatch to go ahead and just let the jail know that we have somebody that's combative. Usually presence is enough to keep people from being stupid, because when you pull into the Sally Port after notifying the jail that you have somebody that's combative, there's usually 5 or 6 guys that are about 6'3" standing there with gloves waiting for you. You guys think cops get away with a lot of stuff? You should pay attention to what happens in the jail. The jailers get away with shit that we would never be able to get away with. If you try to buck up on a jailer, you're going to eat concrete. I've seen people get dragged from the back of a car and literally thrown into a cell while they were hogtied. Yeah, we can't do that. So after the whole thing is over and said and done, we go back and we review the body cam footage. I wish I could show you guys this body cam footage. I had my body cam on for part of the time, I didn't. But the other male officer that responded had his rolling the entire time, and you see him go up to the side of the car, the passenger side of the vehicle, and he tells the guy, "You can't just be out here with your twig and berries out, man." And then because there was piss on everything, you hear me in the background telling the other officers, "Ooh, you're in trouble." You gotta laugh about this stuff, man. So anyway, guys, that is it for today. I had to share that little story with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to go fishing today. I might actually bring my camera with me. I guess it depends on how much time I have. I feel like catching dinner tonight. So I'm gonna go fishing and get some other things done and hopefully try to edit some video footage for you guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I will try to answer them accordingly. Thank you guys so much for joining me. As always, you are awesome. If you haven't already, signed up for the sponsorship program and you get access to exclusive content that nobody else will be able to see. I am going to have Blair on here once again. She really enjoyed hanging out with you guys, so she'll be back probably sometime soon. We haven't set a schedule yet. Anyway guys, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.